Okay, we have recorded messages on the program today. First on the show is Madman Max. You're on the program. What's on your mind, good sir?
Greetings, Oxhorn. It is I, Madman Max here, once again, to ask you for another story, as last week's was such a hit. Today, there are no rules. It can be real or fake or something between, mixing worlds.
Another story?
So, go as long as you wish, as long as it's over 5 minutes.
Oh no.
So then that way we get a nice long story once again.
Oh no.
Have a nice evening, Oxhorn, and enjoy your scotch.
Thank you, Madman Max. Everything about you is long. Your smoke ships are long, and you request long stories. I don't know, man. I don't know if I can do a 5-minute story. I'll tell you a short story. How about that? We'll compromise. It'll be a short story. Let's make a story about hamburgers. Alright? A short story about hamburgers. There was once a young boy who worked in a hamburger factory. And he got up every morning and he put on his peasant shoes. And he put on his peasant apron, which is different from a non-peasant apron. And he put on his nice cloth cap. And he walked a mile to the local hamburger factory, where they made hamburgers. And he stored his belongings in his locker, and he went to the burger-making factory floor, and he started making burgers. And he took the ground chuck, and he molded it into a patty. And then he put it on a grilling machine. And it was wonderful, and it was beautiful. And he tasted his work, and it was savory and delicious. And then he made a bunch of them, and he watched with pride as they went down the conveyor belt, and they were packaged up by other people in the factory and shipped off to restaurants and people's homes where they could enjoy these delicious hamburgers. And he felt a great sense of pride in his work, even though he was but a young boy. And then one day he came to work, and there was a robot standing there with a spatula in his hand, flipping burgers. And his boss came to him and said, "Look there, Ronnie." His name was Ronnie. I don't know why. His name was Ronnie. He said, "Look there, Ronnie. We don't need you anymore. We've got these burger flipping machines, and they can flip burgers faster than you. And their burgers use less meat, which saves on product, which means we're making more money. So you can go on home. We don't need you to work on this anymore, so see you later." And Ronnie was, of course, devastated because he loved making burgers. This was his dream job ever since he was like 7, being 14 now as a boy. Yes, this is a story promoting child labor, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, he's ever since he was a child, he had wanted to be a burger flipper, and he took such pride in making his wonderful burgers, and he was just heartbroken to see these machines making these burgers. But he was a quick thinker. He had a wit. And he said, "Hold on there, Mr. Man. I have a proposition for you." He said, "I want a blind taste test." And the man said, "What do you mean a blind taste test?" And the boy said, "Listen, Mr. Man, we are about quality at this burger-making establishment, and I propose that these machines do not make burgers that are up to the same quality as I would make, as the craftsman that I am." And the man said, "Fine. I will accept your challenge." So, little Ronnie sat on one end of the table, and the burger flipping machine, I'm imagining a Protectron from Fallout 4 as the machine, with a spatula in hand, wearing a chef hat, flipping burgers. That's what's in my imagination right now. They faced each other. They faced off against each other, sitting at a table, and they had a hot plate in front of them, and they had a ground chuck. And the man said, "Ready, set, go!" And the burger flipping machine took like an ounce of beef and used a spatula and flattened it out. And, in the meanwhile, Ronnie is carefully taking a handful of ground chuck and molding it. And then he set it down. gingerly, and he watched as it sizzled, and the outside got a little dark and a little brown and crispy. And then he sliced into it a little bit with the spatula, and he peeked inside, and it was still a little pink on the inside, which is just how he liked it. And the fat was kind of burning off just a little bit, which made it sizzle and it glint at the light. Whereas the machine just pressed down on it with the spatula. All the fat was squeezed out, and before you knew it, it was like a millimeter thin, and it was cooked on one side. And he flipped it over, and it was cooked on the other side. And 30 seconds later, he's done. And Ronnie is still at work. And the guy, Mr. Man, says, "Ronnie, come on, the robot is already done." And Ronnie says, "Wait a minute, this was not a timed contest. This was a taste contest. This is about taste, not about timing." And so Mr. Man says, "All right, do what you got to do." So Ronnie finishes his burger, and he puts it on a bun, and he's got a nice little square of cheddar cheese laid there on top, and he hands it to Mr. Man. Whereas the machine just kind of put it on a white roll and stuck a little thing of lettuce on it with maybe a little parsley and way too many vegetables, and gave it to Mr. Man. Mr. Man, he takes a bite of the machine-made hamburger, and he chews it. And he says, "My hunger is satisfied." And then he takes Ronnie's handmade burger. It fills his entire fist. And he can barely contain himself because he already realizes in his mind that it looks much more appetizing. But he needs to make a profit on these things. So he takes a bite, and he chews it, and he tastes it. And he realizes, oh my gosh, what have I done? This masterpiece made by this 14-year-old boy is the best burger he had ever tasted. What that robot was spitting out was horrible and disgusting. But what this boy had made with his two hands was amazing. And the guy said, "Young man, oh Ronnie, I have learned the error of my ways, and yet I can't change my decision. I have to move towards robots because I can't afford to pay a bunch of artists like you, because you are truly an artist. But as a businessman, I just can't pay an artist like you to hand make these burgers for me anymore." And Ronnie says, "You know what? I respect the difficulty that you have to deal with, but I have a proposition for you. Hire me to program these robots, and give me the authority to hire robot technicians, and I will turn all of your robots into master burger craftsmen like me, based upon my skill set, so that you will still get the productivity of your robots, and yet your burgers will not stink to high heaven and back." And the man, his eyes lit up, and he said, "Yes, Ronnie, I will do that. You are hired. You now manage this entire factory. Do what you got to do." For the next month and a half, Ronnie sat down. He opened up all of the booklets for all of the robots. He learned how the robots worked inside and out. And he saved the jobs of all of the other burger makers at the factory. Because even though they were no longer making burgers, he trained them on how to be robot technicians. And they kept all of the robots in functioning order. They kept an eye on them, and they oiled the little gears in the sprockets, and they would tell the robots jokes during the off hours to keep them entertained, and stuff like that, keeping them all gainfully employed. At the end of a month and a half, he had programmed all of the robots to be master burger craftsmen, just like he was. And they did another taste test, and the man couldn't tell the difference between the one made by the robot, programmed by Ronnie, and the one made by Ronnie. The programming was that good. And so the company went on to package all of these robot-made burgers that were still delicious, and Ronnie saved the jobs of all of his friends, and he still was a gainfully employed young man. He climbed the ranks within his company, and he created a legacy for himself. So the moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen, is that corporations are not necessarily bad. They're businesses that need to make a living. They've got decisions to make. And the best way is not to get in their faces with protests and not shaving your armpits and waving bras and setting things on fire. The appropriate response is to think with clarity and wisdom, and to use your wit and find ways to make everybody happy, to keep the human jobs and to keep the company productivity. To rise above your station in life and to become something greater. Not to drag everything around you down to your level so that you can eke out a living. That is the story of Ronnie the Burger Flipper. That was 5 minutes, wasn't it? Gosh, what have I done? Alright, ladies and gentlemen, sorry about that. 5 whole minutes gone by. This program isn't about me telling stories, it's about me smoking. Let's get back to that. Alright, here we go. All for 17. All for 17 says, so this was a story about yourself when you were 14. No. It's when I was 15 is when I got my first job, and it wasn't it wasn't burgers. It was burritos. I worked at Taco Bell. That was my very first job. I made burritos. And of course, I wasn't a very good burrito craftsman, so the company learned very quickly that I was better talking than I was working with my hands. So they put me at the drive-thru window. And I spent 2 years of my life working a drive-thru window at Taco Bell. My first job, I learned a lot.